Hello everybody, my name is Lawrence Harris and this is my presentation. Now I need you to stay tuned to the information that I'm about to give you about rehabilitation and its impact on the prison system. Now, follow me as I take you on a journey. Let's go. Hello. So let's begin. Now, my question today will be focusing on number 11 for the presentation. If we were using rehabilitation as the purpose of punishment, would we still be facing the same issues we face now? Which are overcrowding, violence in prisons, increase in special population as a result of more deterrence and incapacitation based, if not retributive punishment. Why or why not? I did not quite understand this question, but I did my best to decipher it and to produce this presentation. Now let's get right into it. Now, before we go into the problems of overcrowding, violence in prison, and increase in special populations, let us take a step back a bit and look at what exactly is prison. Now, a prison is a building in which people are legally held for a crime they have committed while awaiting trial. Now, while a person in his prison, he is not completely isolated from everybody. However, he is isolated from the rest of the world. A prison is a closed institution that facilitates learning. It has its own social regimes and it has its own rules and regulations. Therefore, a prison can be described as a social institution. And therefore, in a social institution, we are then going to learn bits and pieces of things, or if not bits and pieces, a lot of things from our surrounding or environment and what is taking place within our prisons. And so we see that prison is not only a social institution as was previously described, but it's also it facilitates social learning, and that's where the social learning theory comes in. Now, this theory is a theory of learning, of the learning process and social behavior, which proposes that new behaviors can be acquired by observing and imitating others. And since people are closed behind bars, this is exactly what they will be doing for some period of their life. Now, let's go into what prisoners learn. Now, prisoners, after being in prison for a period of time, undergo what is known as prisonization. Prisonization is them adapting to what the prison life is all about, right? And so they learn a few things, and some of the things that they learn are really not very good at all. These prisoners learn criminal skills like burglary. They learn to disrespect authority, no trusting guards and stuff like that. They learn crime as a way of life, which is in contrast to what they should be learning, because crime is the reason why they're in prison in the first place, right? They learn force as a necessary means or way of solving problems, and this is not how we solve problems in the real world, which is outside of the social institution of prison, right? And they realize too that they need to support themselves and be loyal to each other, and they need each other to survive, or in order for them to survive, this is what they need to do. Okay, so this prisoner, we see that prisonization has its own consequences, right? So consequences of prisonization, we know that these persons eventually will be reintroduced into the society after their time in prison has been complete. So we see that prisonization now, in its impact on this, it makes reintegration into society more difficult, right? So the skills learned on how to survive in prison does not really work well with the outside world, and we see this while we were going through what prisoners learn, right? So all of those attributes and developing that prisonization encourages, it leads to recidivism, right? So people tend to recommit crime even after leaving the institution, right? So prisoners become prisonized, right? After about 2 years being in prison, they learn all these things. But what I am suggesting, like the question is asking, is how rehabilitation works. And I do believe that rehabilitation can be used in order to reduce overcrowding, violence, and increasing special groups in prison. Now, listen how it works as I introduce rehabilitation as a process. Now, rehabilitation is the process of helping a person to readapt to society or to be restored to his former self, assuming that that former self is positive. All right. And this works in tandem with reformation, which also is the process of attempting to try and change the criminal so that they no longer commit crimes or resort to their criminal behavior. All right. So we see rehabilitation having some not restorative but reformative advantages, right? So what it entails, though, what rehabilitation entails, is it introduces a therapy to prisoners. Remember that in prisons, prisoners learn prisonization, and we have seen what prisonization consists of. Now, rehabilitation, what it introduces to the prisoners is therapy, thus changing their mindset from their previous criminal mindset to try and get it to a better one. All right. So this therapy includes milieu therapy, and you might be wondering what this is. Let me just give you a brief synopsis. This is a therapeutic community that involves the use of a social environment in which the patients take responsibility for themselves and others within a community, right? So we see that they learn how to appreciate not only themselves but others within a specific community, and I believe that this will strongly aid in their approach to certain things. Another therapeutic method that can be used is called aversion therapy. Aversion therapy has to do or involves with kind of joining oneself or pairing the unwanted behavior, wanted criminal behavior, with discomfort. So once the unpleasant feeling comes that is associated with a particular behavior, a criminal behavior, the hope is that the unwanted behavior or action will decrease and eventually stop over time. So we see now that aversion therapy works now on the type of behavior that is become acceptable or a norm to a particular criminal. And we're talking now about reality theory. Reality theory is another theory, and the final theory I'll be using. It is a problem solving and making better choices be introduced to the criminal, right? So the criminal learn to problem solve in other ways than the ways that they're used to, and make better choices, right? And this links the choices, make better choices in order to achieve good goals, and this links their behavior to the goals that they want to receive. Now that is what therapy has to do with, and this helps in this. All of these therapies are therapeutic approaches. They help in redefining the mind of the criminals so that they will change their action towards certain activities. And other forms of rehabilitation includes education and vocational activities. Now, education, as we know, is building cognitive strength and appreciation in certain areas or schools of thoughts, or just building cognitive strength, right? And vocational activity is putting this cognitive strength to work. I mean, if they learn how to tile, they become tilers, if that's such a word, and then they will have good skills, right, to engage in other than criminality. Now, how does this work in overcrowding and violence and increasing special population? How does it work to reduce it or deter it, right? Well, we believe that overcrowding will be less in persons that have been rehabilitated, as they learn how to deal better through all of these treatments or programs, and in leaving the institution will be productive and would not want to willingly return to the institution. So if we find that people are leaving and not returning because they have no developed interest in educational and other interests,
positive interests and self-development and so forth, then we see that we don't have to worry about them returning to the institution. And then because it doesn't encourage recidivism, we have less people in the prisons, and therefore reducing overcrowding, right? And then how does it help with violence? We spoke about conflict, how to deal with conflict, anger management and stuff like that, and how to deal with alternatives ways to deal with these issues, and they take responsibility for their actions. So no more they begin to think before they act. No more they work on instincts, and they realize that there's always a consequence for your actions. And therefore we hope in this that violence in the prisons will decrease significantly. And the increase in population, the increase in special populations, they will learn to how to deal with whether illnesses or whatever they have, how to cope with it, and how to let it not impact their lives, or how to lead their lives even in their special continent, whether gays, lesbian, sick, HIV positive, how to separate it from their person and how to live positive lives with it. And so they will become positively impacted mentally as well, and hopefully their criminal behaviors will begin to decrease and ultimately be done away with. All right, so this is how rehabilitation works on both overcrowding, violence, and in the special populations, in order to decrease these populations within the prison, right? Okay, so the goal though is deterrence. But what is deterrence? Deterrence is the act of discouraging an action or event through instilling doubt or fear of the consequences. So, but the goal of rehabilitation is deterrence as well, except it does not use fear, and it does not use doubt. But these help rehabilitating a person, help them to become more confident and knowledgeable of who they are, and it enables them to take control of their own life outside of clashing with the law of the society, right? So we see that deterrence is an ultimate goal after persons are rehabilitated. Now, the question also mentioned incarceration, and we know that incarceration is a method. Incarceration alone, we know, cannot work. It's a state of being confined or in prison. It's an isolation from the environment or from everybody else in it, and we see that is what is happening in our society. It alone cannot work, because even in our society in Jamaica today, we see overcrowding, violence, and riots in prisons, and special population increasing as a result of just mere incarceration. If it's coupled with rehabilitation, then I believe it will work wonders and miracles within these criminals. And now we take a look at retribution. Now, retribution is described as an eye for an eye treatment kind of thing. So the punishment is in line with the crime, right? So if a person kills somebody, which is the highest form of retribution, then their life is required of them. But we still see that this was something that was done in the US, in the United States, and in contrast to what the theorists believe, retribution actually works the other way. In states where, like Louisiana, where we had the death penalty some time ago, crime rate was increasing more than the states that didn't have the death rate. So we see that retributive means of punishment and for the goal of deterrence is not really working out. However, the best solution is a focus on rehabilitation, and that is seen in the previous points mentioned. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Now I hope you heard, seen, and understood. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you.